Shane Sterner was just a teenager when he got hooked on drugs and ran away from home. Shane's father decided the only way to help his son was to follow him into the drug world. Well, that plan backfired, and suddenly Shane's father was the one who needed to be rescued.
A father and son get the ultimate runner's high as they cross the finish line. Running a marathon is a feat in itself, but even more so for Nick and Shane Sterner. Not long ago, they were getting high on drugs together.
One of the most powerful memories I can have is sitting there receiving a text message on my phone, and it's Shane saying, "Dad, what happened to our family?"
You could either get higher and forget about it, or you could, just let it completely devastate you. So for a year and a half, we decided to just keep going about what we were doing and ignore it.
A father and son, a friendship forged by drugs, a family headed for destruction. Nick can trace his drug use back to his troubled childhood.
My drug was marijuana. I got so addicted to it that I had to have it.
He ran away from an abusive stepfather at age 13. After living on the streets, he was taken in by a new father figure, one who gave him drugs to manipulate and abuse him.
By this time, I'm thinking I'm not going to be a father. I don't know what it means to love or be loved.
Despite his concerns, at 22, Nick became a father himself when Shane was born.
I looked at him, and for the first time, I knew I was needed. Certainly knew what it meant instantly to love. I decided at that point that if I was nothing else, I'd be a father.
Nick married the mother of his son. He navigated fatherhood and marriage the best he could.
Karen and I struggled through the relationship, and finally when he was about 4, I left her.
Nick took Shane with him.
Me and my father were always very close. We were always real close. I remember when I was very young, he'd take me with him everywhere.
Going everywhere also meant seeing everything, including his father's drug use.
Smoking marijuana was something to me that was so much a part of what I did that I wasn't hiding it.
Some of my earliest memories are of parties, biker parties, band practices that lasted for like 2-3 days at a time because everybody was doing various drugs and partying. Yeah, it seemed normal to me. It was my life.
It wasn't long before Shane decided to experiment with drugs too.
I hit a stage of rebellion, and at the same time it was also, entitlement. I felt like my dad was doing it. I grew up and I saw it and I was around it, so I felt like I had the right to do it too.
While Shane began to self-destruct, Nick decided to get clean. He had lost a business and was going through his second divorce.
Most people at that point will turn to drugs and and I said, I can't. I've done that all my life. I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it anymore.
Nick's difficult journey towards sobriety began. He started running to get his body in shape.
I said, if I'm going to build my life again, I'm going to have to do it on the foundation of health. And I began to run fanatically, for the next few years. By 2002, I had placed second in the Masters division in the state of Colorado. I was placing in every race I ran. I was doing great.
Meanwhile, drug addiction took hold of his son.
I remember I was probably 15 years old when I had started doing coke. And at that point in time, I was also doing ecstasy and LSD. I had started selling marijuana. I was out partying with my friends. My dad wanted me home. I didn't want to come home.
Shane left for days at a time. Nick would go search for him.
He'd come and find me, and he'd drag me back home. And I would leave again, and he'd find me, and he'd drag me back home.
Eventually, Shane disappeared. This time, his father couldn't find him.
I'd gotten involved with the methamphetamines underworld in Denver. I guess I got better at hiding. I wasn't even really hiding anymore.
Nick was desperate to reclaim his son. And trying to do the right thing, he made a bad decision. He convinced himself that re-entering the drug world was the only way to get his son back.
I gave up my sobriety. I gave up everything that I had began to build. I had decided to go into the tunnel to find Shane, to get back into the world that I had known when I was younger.
Nick thought he was strong enough to resist the lure of drugs.
Going in, I also saw it coming out, but I saw doing everything necessary to come out with Shane.
Sadly, he became addicted again.
The only thing I started using was meth, and it grabbed a hold of me stronger than I ever thought it would, ever.
Shane heard his dad was using again.
He was completely sober for about 6 or 7 years. I was so proud of him. So when I got that phone call telling me that he had started using drugs again, I was devastated. I contacted my dad for the first time. I went out of my way to contact him for the first time in probably a year and a half.
The father and son reunited. Soon they were doing drugs together.
I started selling him drugs, and next thing you know, we were getting high together. You know, my connections became his connections. We ran in the same circles. He became very involved in my criminal life.
Eventually, the police caught up with them.
It culminated in Shane being arrested for possession, and he spent 10 days in the Denver City jail.
A stint behind bars was just what Shane needed to turn his life around.
And that's when I got saved. I got saved in an 8-foot by 8-foot jail cell. So when this guy came in and he started talking about Jesus and the forgiveness of sin and everything else, but it hit me so hard. I just remember sitting there crying and just thinking and bawling like a baby, and I felt like Jesus was sitting there cradling me right then and there, you know, confessing every sin that I could think of that I had ever committed, and that was it. That was it. From then on, I was like, okay, well, now what do? I need to learn how to apply this to my life. I need to learn, you know, how to take what I've been through and move forward.
Shane knew he had to get clean. He decided to enter the New Life program, a Christian-based rehabilitation program at the Denver Rescue Mission. There was just one condition.
He said, well, it's contingent on you joining me.
Nick agreed to enter the program for the sake of his son.
For 3 months, I thought that I was there for Shane. And suddenly, it made sense. And it hit me like a lightning bolt that if I didn't build my life on a foundation of faith, that it was nothing. It wasn't worth having. It hit me